Most of us learn to fly in big, long, paved runways. Training for the backcountry is very important, and planning for the flying and the places you go is even more important. As soon as I got my private license, I started to train to go to short fields and do the backcountry in Costa Rica. I started with some lowlands canyons, like in this video I'm showing right now. It is important to be comfortable at flying at slow speeds. Then I started to do the grassfield landings. I started with long runways initially. This one has some high density altitude, which is 4,000 feet elevation, and density altitude is about 6,500 feet. It is key to be patient and start slowly and step by step. Once I got comfortable with long grass strips, I started to go to shorter ones and more narrow ones, more challenging ones. In my case, I never had a backcountry instructor, so I learned on my own by reading, asking, and very important, lots and lots of practice. The main reason I started to make videos was to film my landings and takeoffs on those grass strips and narrow runways, so I would learn from my own mistakes. Flying in the backcountry safely requires you to know your airplane at different weights and different temperatures of the day, different wind conditions. Landing the gravel bars taught me where to touch down exactly and no floating, and be very precise. Using and trusting the angle of attack indicator is very useful for this kind of flying, because once you get into the backcountry, you get into canyons and approaches to some of these strips. It's not a place to start learning. It is a good idea to overfly the strip before landing on all the backcountry strips. Look for obstacles and get familiar and plan your approach. I'm going to show you the very first time I went to Idaho. I did a lot of planning before going. Watch videos of those strips to get familiar. Fly Idaho is a great book to have if you want to plan to go to Idaho and fly those backcountry strips. It shows you in great detail everything you want to know about those strips. Part of my planning also is fly simulators into those strips. Believe it or not, they are pretty accurate and give you a great idea. I also asked the community about those places. There is a lot of knowledge and they're always eager to help. This is my very first landing into Cabin Creek, so even after all this planning, I ended up quite high. I started to do steep turns, S-turns, full flaps to reduce the altitude and do a proper approach. This is the part that knowing your aircraft is very useful. Always try to fly lightweight in the backcountry. Know how much fuel your flight needs, plan with your reserve, and don't take 30 gallons or 20 gallons extra fuel. My airplane is equipped with size fuel senders, which are super accurate, so they help a lot. I find in Idaho the streets themselves are not as challenging, but the approaches are very challenging. It's very easy to get lost in these canyons and take the wrong one, or end up too high or too low and approach an airstrip with no go around. This is the same landing from the cockpit. Something that is a rule for me is to fly very early in the morning to have smooth air and cold air. It helps a lot. You don't want to come into these places when it's windy and hot. Here I'm doing my S turns to lose altitude. I plan my flights to be as light as possible, and all the weight goes in the extended baggage compartment, so it moves the CG a little more aft. That way I have a slower stall speed and it flies more comfortable at slow speeds. Soldier bar. The challenge with this airstrip was to get into the right canyon. And then once you're in it, it's a long straight final approach. And you have to come pretty slow because although it's quite long, it is very rough. You want to touch down as slow as possible. This is my very first landing into Soldier Bar. I did this approach in my simulator lots of times, and it really helps. This approach is very impressive. It's a small plateau in a very steep canyon. All this training and planning was paying off. Now here is my very first approach into Lower Loon. First, overflew the airstrip and looked for obstacles, and I planned my approach. This one you have to come slow through a narrow canyon that is twisting. The first time you're doing this approach, it is very exciting. You are very close to the walls of the canyon and you are making turns and trying to approach at the proper speed, so at the end you are on final at the right speed and you don't float. This trip is not very long, it's just 1200 feet, and we are in a place that we have high density altitude. This one has no go around, so you better get it right the very first time. It was also early morning, cold, calm air, which allows me to go pretty slow. Again, planning for this airstrip, I look it up in Google Earth, YouTube videos, ask the backcountry aviation community, and practice it in my simulator. If you come just with the chart, it's definitely not enough and will be a risk. Backcountry trips needs lots more planning and preparation. This time, this is my very first landing at Mahoney Creek. First, overflew the airstrip, planning my approach. This is pretty straight for the canyon, so you turn into the canyon and go to the approach. If you are not pretty comfortable flying at slow speeds and touching down at the point that is required, there are plenty of backcountry instructors that will take you up in the backcountry in Idaho. After my first day in Idaho, I went for breakfast to Sulphur Creek and met Galen Hanselman, the writer of Fly Idaho. I told him his book was great and helped me a lot going to all these trips.